question on withholding taxes. Some people have tried it. I think everyone's failed. You mentioned people, I suppose, doubling up, still paying their taxes and setting up their own local institutions. Can you tell us a bit about the legalities of taking on this quite scary task?
So I can't get into any great detail on that, other than to say don't try it as an individual. I'm not going to tell you that there's anything in principle wrong with that. We've met many people saying you owe it to your fellow countrymen to continue paying your taxes. We certainly do not. We don't think along those lines. Doing it as an individual is a good way to end up in prison. So please don't try that. It's worked for ratepayers in Durban. I think they fought a court case, and I think they won that court case. So slowly but surely, I think the legal principle is to pull something like that off are being developed. I don't think we're necessarily there yet, but look, I don't want to dissuade anyone from not paying taxes, but please do it at such a large scale as you possibly can. Doing the tax revolts at the individual level are never going to pay off. The other thing I think I just want to add on to that is the double paying is going to be a reality for a while still, and people need to get very comfortable with that, unfortunately, because none of this is fair. And we do not live in a fairly governed society, and for a while still we won't. So I think the pursuit of fairness must be paused, at least for a while, at least while we get the basic things that make a society functional right. We need to get crime down. We need to get the water pumping. We need to get electricity in our buildings and in our businesses. Let's do all of that, and let's do that at a very large scale, even when we replace failing central government, because at that scale, then one can in fact go to court and say, listen, we are doing all of this for ourselves. Us paying taxes makes no rational or logical sense. And you can even start saying it's a total violation of the rule of law for us to be doing something like this when the rule of law is based on this idea of reasonableness and kind of the law making sense. Then the court might give one a hearing. But going into it now, going to court and saying, listen, I feel that it's unfair to me to be kind of paying taxes. I think our courts still have that inclination to be seen as activists for social justice. And you might have a lot of trouble doing it now. So I think give it time. Give it time, do the things that need to get done. Don't ask for any money in return for that. And then I'm certain we'll get to a point where one can start talking about saving some tax money and potentially withholding tax.
And Sarklicha's efforts in Ditsabola?
Yes, I mean, yes, and so I think on Ditsabola it's interesting. So in some municipalities, at least at the municipal level, rates are not being collected anymore at all because they can't. The municipality has totally collapsed, so people aren't paying rates. So I guess it's easier there, in theory at least, to start doing things because you don't really have to pay rates because no one wants your money anymore. Then you start doing the work that needs to be done. In the Ditsabola, there's a new association being established, the Ditsabola Service Association, which is effectively an alternative local government. I don't think they're quite there yet. It's early days, it's still being developed. But that institution hopes to provide all the services that municipality, in theory and on paper, provides. Now, if that is successful, if the Ditsabola Service Association does in fact provide municipal services, I think it would be very easy really to go to court and say, listen, now Ditsabola is sending us rate invoices. Why would we pay that? I think it's hit or miss with the type of judge you get or the personality of the judge, but I would be surprised if you don't at some point find a judge who says, now of course you're not going to pay rates because it's not the municipality providing the service. Not there yet, though.
Hi, my name is Ben Shiluwati. I'm from Bancroft, but I'm asking this more from a personal capacity. I understand a lot of the discussion has been around more logical and practical steps behind house rule. And I wanted to ask a more softer question that I don't feel very apt to speak to the more legal and practical elements of it. But something like house rule, have you assessed it through the lens of cultural acceptance, like how to be culturally accepted in the spaces that you want to implement this in? Because and please, with all due respect, it seems a little bit culturally elitist to kind of give the implication that people in the space know how to run it in the best way possible, and how do you not essentially rebel against or have the people who, because you're saying it's down to the individual, not basically go against that definition of house rule. Sorry, and then also having elements, have you studied the more practical expressions of what I would kind of deem as like an individual house rule in the more informal spaces in Cape Town or in South Africa? Like in the township, have you observed how people essentially implement the practical elements of some of what you've described, but without the more defined, legal steps they've taken, like individuals who have set up their environment so that they serve themselves, because they know the municipality and their government, etc., doesn't serve them.
Yeah, look, I think we would encourage all South Africans, regardless of their cultural context or their income level, to start adopting some of these proposals. I mean, I think what's happening in KwaZulu-Natal, I think is, in the run-up to this election, is going to be hugely consequential for the future of that province and the country more broadly, with the political changes that are happening there. And we saw in KwaZulu-Natal the violence that beset during the 2021 riots. That affected many different communities, and you had community policing forums, neighborhood watches. Where those structures existed, they were able to protect their businesses and their livelihoods and so on. And I think that was across the kind of racial spectrum, right? And then, I think very importantly is that this idea of voluntary free association. So we're not saying that, we're not prescribing how groups should be classified or how they should structure their affairs, but we're encouraging people to come together where there's mutual self-interest and kind of common bonds to really strengthen that.
Yeah, so I mean, we really are taking this from a real perspective of real anti-elitism. That's the point, because we believe that the kind of the elitist instinct is to say, well, I know what's best, and everyone has to kind of fall in line with that because, well, I'm me and I have all these degrees and they're them. But home rule really is this recognition that however a community decides to kind of structure itself and define itself, even, as David says, the voluntarily, it's ultimately up to them how to do the things that need to be done there, because we as a relatively small organization in Johannesburg cannot possibly know the issues that are occurring in these areas, in these communities. But that's even more true, really, for the central government. That's even more true for, and in some cases, provincial governments. Less true for municipal governments, but our municipalities are huge in South Africa as well. One must also think about that. I was quite astounded by how large the Overstrand local municipality was. We were looking across the bay at Gansbaai, and I was like, yeah, it's a different municipality, but apparently it's one large local municipality. So we have a lot of government by others in South Africa rather than government by our own community. So that's certainly our intention to bring that about. And we're followers in this case. We didn't start this trend, really, that's getting going in South Africa to a very large extent now of doing things themselves. I mentioned earlier, AfriForum and the Solidarity Network have in their own communities really set the example for how to do that. But South Africa's townships have long resisted the idea of being dictated to by central government. This is something that's from the 80s, and we saw this most clearly during the COVID-19 lockdown. While we in the suburbs were cowering in our houses, hiding under the tables, life was carrying on in the townships. No one there said we will just fall in line with what we're being dictated to by the central government. So the natural or instinctual desire to govern oneself has already found its practical manifestation in South Africa. Our agenda is to tell these communities, listen, what you're doing is not wrong, because that ambivalence is still there. When local communities start doing things, we still find that the organizers are like, well, I don't really know whether we should be doing this. Maybe the municipality should be doing this. I'm not really sure. And because we take personal and community responsibility so seriously, our answer is no. Even if tomorrow or the 29th, a new government comes to power and it's the best thing ever, it's some Norwegian or Swedish government or whatever that kind of just does everything properly, it's still better for your community to take ownership of the things that affect you and to do it from within the community, because then it's yours. You take it more seriously, you take care of it, you maintain it. That's the results of taking responsibility, and that's something we want to encourage, even if things get better in South Africa, because even though it's been socialism and the NDR that's led us to this point, at a more abstract level, it's because we've ceded responsibility for centuries, really, as people, to the state. We've decided that, well, we don't really want to do X anymore. Let's give it to some politicians, and they'll take care of it. And sometimes it works, but when they stop taking care of it, we've lost our sense of responsibility, and now we don't know what to do. But now South Africa is regaining that, and that's actually an incredibly inspiring story, and we're catching up really to the trend.
I mean, while we have things like the legal separation of powers, we've seen through party allegiance how that can be watered down. We'll give an example. If the DA are invited into central government, do you think that's going to scuttle the sort of federalist motivation?
Well, well, we have a DA representative here, you can remember. But actually, what we're saying is we don't want to be prescriptive, but I suppose we are. If there is some broader coalition that takes place, the DA shouldn't just do it for some kind of abstract national patriotic impulse. It should play hardball and say, well, if you need us to keep you in power, these are our conditions. You need to give us the authority over the port. You need to cede the control over the provincial railways. And that, I think, should be a very important bargaining chip on the table for its participation. And that's sort of what I was talking about with the Machiavellian approach, to say, okay, well, we need some conditions for our collaboration.